In his memoirs, General Douglas MacArthur encouraged field leaders to study military history for insights and principles that could be applied to conditions of the present and near future. These principles know no limitation of time, he said. Consequently, the Army extends its analytical interest to the dust-buried accounts of wars long past as well as to those still reeking with the scent of battle. To master the art of strategic decision-making, we must learn to see the strategic situation correctly. With experience, decision-makers acquire the ability to recognize the patterns that are there, partially hidden by the fog of war. Biographers of Napoleon Bonaparte talk about his ability to size up a situation with a single coup d'oeil, pronounced coup d'oeil, meaning a stroke of the eye, or glance. Napoleon was so knowledgeable about his strategic situation, the landscape, the enemy, available technology, similar situations from the past, that he could understand and respond quickly to ever-changing circumstances. In Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink, he refers to this ability as intuition, the power of thinking without thinking. How does one learn le coup d'oeil? In his book, Outliers, Gladwell explains the nature of genius, and how one goes about attaining that status. While acknowledging that people of true genius generally begin with a detectable advantage in terms of generalized intelligence, he asserts that for genius to surface, one must put in a significant amount of work and practice. Gladwell says that researchers in the field of high-end human development have coalesced around the notion that it takes 10,000 hours of practice, 10 years of hard effort to achieve true mastery of a discipline. He provides examples from a wide variety of fields. From chess masters to Mozart, to the Beatles, Bill Gates, Bill Joy, mastermind of the internet, and on and on. True masters may have been born with talent, but they do not truly master their field without putting in the work. With time, they learn to see patterns of truth that others miss. The chess master has seen countless configurations on chessboards and gradually learns to see them as a whole experience, pattern or story. To the master, the pieces are just elements of something larger. Learning real-world strategy is even harder, of course, because true strategic decisions are few and far between, leaving it difficult to accrue relevant experience necessary to gain that intuitive feel necessary to master the competitive landscape. We can learn to make decisions by watching and learning from others. To study the dynamics of decision-making under pressure, Gary Klein lived with firefighters and other emergency or quick response personnel. His objective was to understand how people make decisions in the most hectic of moments. In his book Sources of Power, Klein concludes that the keys to sound spontaneous decision-making are entirely different than what matters when one ponders decisions with time available for analysis and deliberation. The best decision-makers in chaotic, fog of war conditions seem able to call on intuition, knowing what to do without knowing why or how they know. Klein tells the story of a fire captain who entered a burning house, got an odd feeling that something was amiss, and ordered his firefighters out of the structure seconds before it collapsed. It turned out the source of the fire was in a basement that they did not know was there. Something about the situation just felt wrong to the captain, and he acted on his intuition, saving the lives of his men. Intuition, Klein says, is recognizing complex patterns, without knowing how we do the recognizing. Realizing the importance of this intuitive way of knowing, Klein paid particular attention to the ways that knowledge is shared among co-workers. He found that while decision-making in formal settings is characterized by careful logical reasoning and analysis of probabilities, knowledge about how to act and react spontaneously to fast-moving circumstances is passed in through the telling of war stories, as participants gather after events have unfolded and recount what happened from each of several perspectives. Stories that carry significant learning, such as survival through harrowing experience, are passed on for years and years, and shared across departmental boundaries. These stories, in turn, provide a way for listeners to mentally rehearse they would react under the circumstances shared by the storyteller. The staff ride, a way of learning from history. In the 19th century, the Prussian general Helmuth von Moltke, the Elder, began the practice of a staff ride, a direct translation of the German term Stabsreise as a way of teaching battlefield decision-making to members of his general staff. Moltke took his subordinates on riding tours, on horseback, of areas where, in the event of war, significant military events, such as battles or the deployment of large numbers of troops, were likely to occur. These exercises serve the purpose of training staff officers to appreciate the operational and strategic significance of particular pieces of terrain and informing contingency planning. The Prussian staff ride evolved to an early form of war game. In this expanded form of staff ride, commanding officers and their staffs would deploy in the field as if at war, but without troops, with teams for both sides. The exercise allowed the commanders to war game more realistically than on a tabletop. Critiques would take place at the conclusion of the staff rides. As an example, the Battle of Tannenberg was largely anticipated in one of Alfred von Schlieffen's pre-war staff rides. Schlieffen was Moltke's successor and the architect of the German war plan that resulted in World War I, now known as the Schlieffen Plan. In recent decades, the U.S. Army has conducted staff rides as a key aspect of educating officers about the art of strategic, operational and tactical decision-making. A program of staff rides originates out of the Command and General Staff College, CGSC, at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. These staff rides often focus on battles from the American Civil War such as battles of Gettysburg and Chickamauga. Usually, Army staff rides consist of a guided tour of the battlefield, with explanations provided by military historians, park rangers, or others with expertise on the events in question. The Army says that the purpose of a staff ride is an educational technique for studying leadership, decisions taken and whether alternatives could have been employed. Requires active participation, where each group member assumes the role of a participant in the battle, and he is questioned by the others as to the view on what occurred in the battlefield. Brings to life, on the very terrain where historic encounters took place, examples, applicable today as in the past, of leadership tactics and strategy, communications, use of terrain, and, above all, the psychology of men in battle.